Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We have several artists on the panel which I will introduce. We have Ayodele, who also goes by Ayo for short. He's a painter, photographer, and art writer. We have Ehiko, who's a painter, and we have Kolade, who's a photographer. We will now start our question and answer session with the artists on the panel. A question we have for the artist is, how would you describe your art or photography?
My photography career. Of course, my stint as an artist has actually been a little bit more different because I was trained as a sculptor and I actually love working with bronze. But with time, maybe due to one reason or the other, I just keep innovating and I keep trying new methods and new ways. I work with acrylic, I work with oil, I work with watercolor a lot.
Okay, and what about the other two people on the panel?
I'm in. Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
My art is very, I would say, expressive. I like using a lot of bright colors. I like using a lot of colors, basically. I don't like dull, minimalistic art or super realistic art. I use a lot of paints, acrylic, gouache, oil. I also work with a lot of wood, paper, fabric. I like textiles a lot. Yeah, so I just like expressing myself through art. And so my art is very expressive, very rigid brush strokes, a lot of movement. So.
Kolade, would you like to go next?
Yes. I take pictures I do portraits, scenery, and lifestyle. And with those three categories, I get really expressive and creative and try to create pictures that would make my viewers feel some certain type of emotion, whether anger, peace, anything that just makes you feel something as you see it is what I try to create. I also I'm also really good at capturing moments. So I cover a lot of events such as weddings and birthdays. And I try to make my images always touch the emotions of its viewers.
Thank you for your response, Kolade.
Thank you everyone for answering. So the next question that we have for you guys is, how does your cultural background inform your art?
I was born in Nigeria before I moved to Canada, and that has largely influenced a lot of the way I create my stuff. But largely, I internalize whatever I have to do first before it comes out. And because of the cultural background I have, everything that I see, every facet of life, this tends to reflect in my works. Women, men, emotions, actions, and sometimes some of my works tend to be a little bit more political too.
Okay, does anyone else like to respond to Carol's question?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, I was born in Lagos, and it was only when I came to Canada that I really wanted to not lose myself. So I started taking my culture more seriously, because when I was born in Lagos, because when you're in Lagos, everyone speaks like one main language, Yoruba or English, or Igbo, but not really. So I'm from Benue State, and my mom is Delta Igbo, and so with arts, I really wanted to connect more to my history and my culture, and learning more about Benue State and like my language, which is Idoma, and even recently learning more about Igbo people, or like the history and the culture, has really inspired me to create more, not only for myself, but for the people around me, my people from back home, and so that I can still be connected to where I come from.
Thank you, Ehiko.
I'm also born in Nigeria, and I'm Yoruba, and my culture is embodied in my captions and my photoshoot concepts and my style. So, and also my art has gotten me more familiar with my culture, because for example, things like weddings and covering events, for weddings, my culture has like, the Yoruba culture has certain things that happen at certain times throughout the wedding. And then as a photographer, you have to be on point and know when this is going to happen. So my photography has made me do more research and try to understand more about weddings and Yoruba culture as a whole. And I would say my background has more so, or my art has more so helped me be more in touch with my background than I used to be when I wasn't really doing photography. But for inspiring my art, just in captions and photoshoot concepts, basically.
Thank you everyone for your responses. Wow, it was so great to hear how your Nigerian background influenced your artwork. So my next question is, what artistically influences your artwork besides your culture, and what inspires you to do art?
Well, maybe I should start first. While I was going through the training of being an artist in the uni, I was highly motivated by a lot of Western artists. The major ones are Rodin, Degas, Michelangelo, as well as Leonardo da Vinci. I studied a lot of their works, and I tried as much as possible to be more Westernized in my approach to interpreting concepts and ideas. But with time, I discovered that there is no particular one way of creating art. So I started looking inwards. And with time, I realized we have a lot of great masters in Africa too. People like Bruce Onobrakwea, Ben Enwo, and Elana Sui. And of course, we have a lot of more artists, coming up now. And this has really influenced my way of thinking and approach to executing projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayo. Does anyone else have a response?
I would say that right now I gain inspiration from my peers, and the people that I know that also create art as well. They inspire me. I'm inspired by nature. I'm inspired by pretty much almost everything. I feel like at this point, art is pretty much my purpose. So to not create art just doesn't make sense to me. So the inspiration really comes from every single thing around me.
Thank you for your response.
And I could say the same thing. It's basically everything I'm surrounded with that inspires me. But in detail, I would say other arts and other artists, the movies I watch, anime, and my day-to-day life experiences gives me
Okay.
inspiration for my photography.
Yeah. Thank you for your response, Kolade.
Everyone. So my next question is, what processes, materials, or techniques do you use to create your artwork or photography?
I would like to go first. For my photography, of course, you know, you need your camera. It doesn't really matter what kind of camera you have, as long as it can record the image. Although we are veering more towards the digital cameras now, but in the past it wasn't so. As for painting, I use different kind of materials ranging from canvas, papers, fabrics, and brushes, and a whole lot of other stuffs. I also explore wood, metal, and a few other items. I actually use everyday items in some of my works. Like I paint with coffee that you drink. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have an answer?
Yeah, feeding off of Ayodele's response, I think it's really cool how you said you paint with coffee. I was also going to mention turmeric and like even vegetables like beets, like learning how to dye raw canvas or even just fabric with natural materials is something that I've also been doing as well. And I think is so cool because people think you need all these tools to create art. And it's like, you really don't need that much. You could use like everyday materials to create something beautiful.
And as a photographer, I use a camera. I also use editing software such as Lightroom and Photoshop, but that's my preference. There's also other ones out there like Capture One, all these new ones that I think would also be competitive in the markets or be able to compete to Adobe. And for creating content, I try to start from my caption, and then I create my caption and then walk from my caption towards creating the picture and taking the pictures and creating
Okay.
content.
Sorry. Okay, so thank you for your responses. So I wanted to know, what are you besides an artist? How do you define your role in life?
Oh, well, let me go first. Besides being an artist, I'm a father, I'm a friend to my wife, and I'm a poet. I write poems once in a while. I also I love writing about artists, especially African artists or artists that Africa related. I actually created a website all by myself from scratch. So I definitely take on different kinds of role depending on whatever the situation determines. Thank you.
This is a very difficult question to answer for me because I feel like art is my life, but not like in terms of always creating, more like in terms of life itself is art, in terms of like everything we do is so poetic, like the seasons changing or even just waking up every morning or having a routine is like a performance piece. Like I like to call my life as like a living performance piece, which is also art in itself. And outside of being an artist, quote unquote, is still art because at the end of the day, I'm a very spiritual person. So I believe that God created everything and we are basically mini versions of God himself. So we are also creators. We are also born to create. We are also, because we are born in creation is like the main thing in life. And I feel like it's all around us, but it's been suppressed so much that we just feel like it's for only certain types of people. But I feel like we're all here to create. I feel like art is everywhere. Art is in everything. You know, you look at a tree stump and it's the same as like your fingerprint, and it's like that's art. Like, but I just see art in everything. So it's kind of hard to not call myself an artist, but at the same time, outside of art, I just am. I just am.
Thank you for your response.
And for me, it's actually a really deep question. I would say I'm still figuring it out where I'm apart from an artist, but currently I have a dream to be a strong passion for environmental sustainability. And I'm honing my skills in an understanding of energy production and remediation techniques. And I would also say that I'm a good listener and critical thinker, but apart from that, I'm still figuring things out.
Okay, thank you so much for your responses. So my next question is, how do you define success as an artist or as a person, and what do you hope to accomplish in your career?
How do you define success as an artist? That is a difficult one, because success is what you define it to be. There is no particular end stop. I mean, like, are you trying to, it's difficult to say monetarily or otherwise. But basically, it's peace of mind, because I believe my works are usually the best thing I get out of my work is if I do it and I'm happy about it. If it's successful, good. But if it's not successful, yeah, I do goof, sometimes. I just keep it aside. So success is what you make of it in art, and as long as you're happy doing your trade, I think you are good.
Thank you for your response. Does anyone else on the panel have a response?
Yes, I do. I feel like success is exactly what Ayodele said. It's what you make it. It's how fulfilled you are, how fulfilled you feel when you do something. Is that inner knowing of like accepting things for what they are. I feel like being an artist, like for me, success is learning how to surrender to the process of things, whether they work out or not. And I don't really see success in a materialistic way or like in terms of like how much money you make. I feel like success is basically finding balance between creating what you love, creating it for yourself, creating it for other people, and learning from it.
And to buttress on what Ehiko said, I feel like success also has to do with you enjoying what you do and being happy putting out content.
Okay, thank you so much for your responses.
Thank you, guys. So my next question is, did you ever feel that as an African Canadian, you were viewed differently in the art industry? And have you ever faced any barriers of discrimination?
Yes. As an African Canadian, I have been exposed to different kind of situations. I have been embarrassed, at a particular point. I remember a story of me going to a frame maker, and as at that time I was really broke. So I offered to sell a few of my watercolors. I asked him to buy it, and he said, "How much is my price?" I said, "He should just give me a price." He said, "It's $50 that is going to buy one, and the frame that I'm going to make is going to be worth $200. that means the frame is more important than my work. I won't know whether that has to do with the coloration of my skin, or because he just viewed me as less than the best. But I believe, based on my research, that you have to stand up for yourself. You have to just make a way for yourself. You don't have to allow people's views to bring you down, because there are times you are creative and you are a little bit in doubt whether this is good enough. As an African Canadian, I think I'm in a better place right now than when I started off, really. But basically, as an artist, you just have to make your own way. Thank you.
So sorry, Ayo, to hear about your experience being undervalued. Does anyone else have something to add?
For me, I have faced discrimination mostly at school. I go to OCAD University, and when I first got to OCAD, there weren't that many Black people at my school. And because the type of work that I do is mostly around decolonization and like spirituality, African masks, Black hair, Black skin, melanin, healing. So my work wasn't perceived in the best way, in terms like people didn't really understand what I was talking about. People didn't try to understand what I was talking about. I wouldn't really get feedback from my teachers or like my peers. I would feel like I had to change the themes that I was mostly working around to fit like the Western standard, or like how other people were doing art in my school. I felt like I had to do art like that, but then I didn't, because I knew that like the work that I was doing was important to me. And just like Ayodele said, you have to make your own way, you have to make your own path, whether people believe you or not, whether people are interested in hearing what you have to say or not. And I also kind of feel like now, because of where I'm at now, I don't even feel bad, whereas back then I would feel like I was misunderstood. But now it's like, now people want to hear what I have to say, and now people are interested in the work that I'm doing. So I feel like definitely being an African Canadian is hard, because you don't feel like I kind of feel like you don't feel like you fit in anywhere. Like you come to Canada, they're like, oh, you're African. You go back to Nigeria, they're like, oh, you that you're coming from abroad, like, what do you know, like here? So it's kind of like you're floating in between, and you don't really know what path to take. But at the end of the day, just stick to your journey, because our journey is different.
Thank you, Ehiko, for talking about your journey and overcoming the issues that you had while being a student. Kolade, do you have anything to say in terms of the question?
I've had a nasty experience with discrimination and photo shoots, because, well, during one of my shoots, my clients and I were asked to leave the location because my clients were wearing the Nigerian traditional attire. They called it costume. But thankfully, the situation didn't escalate. The police actually ended up showing up, but in the escalator, they came to mediate and help everything ease out. But that experience kind of put things into perspective for me as to how limited opportunities were for people of color. Because coming from Nigeria, I didn't really have that knowledge or exposure. And then coming into Canada and going through something like that, it was like eye-opening for me. But like Ehiko and Ayodele said, the main thing is to keep focusing on your journey and you, and what you're doing, the work that you're putting out. So, and not letting the negative energy coming out from the outside affect you.
Thank you, Kolade, for your response. I'm so sorry to hear. I hope one day that more people will be more inviting towards Nigerian attire and not just label it as a costume. Carol, would you like to go and ask the next question?
Yeah. So the next question to the panel: what advice would you give to young upcoming artists, and what is the best advice someone gave you?
I don't remember getting advice in general, but one advice that I always gave myself was explore different mediums and connect with other people, not only your age, but also older than you, so that you can learn from them as well. And be open to trying different things with your art, be open to exploring different mediums, be open to collaborating with people, because you learn with experience in art. Like, you can't just you can't do the same thing over and over again and expect to grow. So don't be scared to experiment with different mediums or like explore different ways of creating.
Well, maybe I should just chip in a little bit. I don't know whether I'm the right person to advise an upcoming young artist, because what we viewed as a concept or a painting while I was growing up is viewed totally differently today. But the common denominator is the fact that you have to be very hard. You have to also practice a lot, because no matter what, I learned abstract painting is even more difficult than if you have to paint something that simulates a photography. I don't do much of an abstraction, but I know that in all the genre, the most effective tool to use is to keep practicing your trade over and over again and again. Thank you.
I agree with what Dr. Ayodele said. The most important advice I've gotten was that opportunities will continue to come, but the important thing is to be prepared. So just keep pouring into your craft, keep feeding into it. The only way to grow in the art industry is by experience and by trying new things. So just keep creating and the skill keep growing.
Thank you so much for everyone on the panel for sharing the advice, and also for being a panelist for today's webinar. So I just wanted to direct the questions to the audience. If anyone in the audience wants to ask a question, they can unmute themselves or ask a question in the chat box.
Well, I would like to find out from all the artists, what role do you think a photographer, a fine artist has in an industrialized society like Canada? What role do you think you can play as an immigrant in the Canadian society? So I'm looking beyond your being Nigerian, Canadian, African Canadian, to looking at yourself as an artist. What role do you think you would like to play? And I would want Mr. Ayodele to be the last to speak, and if he would grant me that.
Granted.
Thank you very much.
I feel like, as mentioned earlier, art is my purpose. So being here, whether I'm in Canada, whether I'm in Nigeria, wherever I am in the world, my work is just to be an artist and to create and to basically record what is around me through different mediums. I feel like that's the role of artists, to record the times, to make sure that someone is, keeping track of what the plants look like, where your mind is at, what's going on around you, what your community is doing. I feel like artists are very good at recording what is happening in the present moment. And that's what I think my role is to do. And that's why I think I'm here, is to record what's happening in the present moment, be it historically, be it culturally, be it spiritually. I hope that answered the question. I hope I can answer the question to the best of my abilities.
I also agree with what Ehiko said about art being a means of documenting what's happening in the current time, and us as creators having that job. And for me, in my field, in the field that I'm in, I would say I'm still trying to figure out a way, or I'm still figuring out a way to connect my photography to my environmental sustainability dream. And I'm still on that journey right now. That's my answer.
If I may come in now, as an artist, I have a dual role to play. The first one being that I'm a cultural ambassador, whether I like it or not. I am from 2 different nations, and I've imbibed the different cultures. So the best I could do is show up and let people absorb what I have in the different culture that they have never had an experience before. And the next one is that as an artist, I'm supposed to act as a voice to speak for the helpless, because when we go to the Canadian society, we see a lot happening. As an artist, I am entitled to be able to speak for those people who are homeless, to be able to speak to people who are being persecuted based on their sexuality or based on their color of their skin, because a lot of that goes on around here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your responses. And in the chat box, I put there, from what I heard you say about cultural mediation. And I have always been of the opinion that sometimes artists, being who they are, simply leave their work to critics to extend and extrapolate its meanings. And I don't know what you have as an outcome for this webinar today, but I would like to make a little suggestion that maybe all the panelists should submit to the organizers maybe 5 or 10 of their works, compiled, and speak to it. Maybe get a critic or get somebody to speak to the works and then circulate it. Even if it's not in print form, maybe it could be virtual, because it is this series of conversations and engagements that actually extend the role that you see yourself, even as a documenter, because as a documenter, you are not just a conduit. I've always believed that people like you, like Miss Ode says, have spiritual role and responsibility within the society. So I look at it that apart from being just documenters, maybe artists like yourself in privileged position, being in Canada, could also extend the conversation. Thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kole, for asking that question to our panelists. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. We can definitely address what you had said and definitely try to continue the conversation after this webinar. Does anyone else have questions? Okay, I noticed that there was a question in the chat box from Calabello. How can your art be a way to learn about your perspectives and a way for others to learn about themselves at the same time?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Is that a question?
Yes, it was a question from Calda Bello. How can your art be a way to learn about your perspective as an artist and a way for others to learn about themselves at the same time?
Well, I didn't grasp the full extent of the question, but what I know as an artist is that your work has two dimensions to it. The dimension which you see your work and the dimension which other people see it. So definitely, you could make a drawing of, let's say, maybe a mother carrying a baby, and somebody sees it and interprets in diverse ways. So it's subjective, really. It's subjective.
Thank you for your answer, Ayo. Does anyone else in the panel have an answer? Right. Does anyone else, oh, sorry, Ehiko, were you going to speak?
I was just gonna agree with what Ayodele said in terms of perspective. You can teach someone about what your art is supposed to be about, or they might learn from it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's their own perspective, because art is very subjective and vague, and it's perceived in so many different ways. And I think that's the beauty of art itself.
Thank you, Ehiko. Do you have an answer, Kolade? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I could add to the beauty of art. Like, for example, just to address the point of art being subjective, like I could make something or create something and someone else could view it in the point of view that I never even like saw it, but I'm the one that created it. That's literally how subjective art can be. So yeah, I agree with what Ehiko and Ayodele have said so far.
Okay, thank you for your responses. I'm sorry that we are running behind on time. I just wanted to re-present the presentation we showed earlier, just to show you guys each person's artwork again. Hold on, let me just share my screen. So we have artwork from Ayo. We have artwork from Ehiko. And we have artwork from Kolade. So Carol will put everyone's contact information in the chat box. So thank you so much for the guest panelists. We learned a lot from you guys. And thank you for everyone who is here to listen to them. I also wanted to thank Calda Bello for helping us organize this event, and we'll also leave her information in the chat box. She's the co-founder of Obatala Inc. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.